Thank you for joining us again on No Stoplights. Want to begin by thanking you for joining us again on No Stoplights. We're actually getting some formal coaching when it comes to our podcast, and one of the initiatives is to make sure you know how much we appreciate you joining in this once again feeble attempt at podcasting that we hope eventually grows and dominates the internet as we have been successful in dominating the radio airwaves over the PD. I say that a bit sarcastically, but not all sarcasm there. I want to thank our sponsors, and I mean this very sincerely. And today's an interesting podcast to thank our sponsors because I am a bit uneasy, a bit unsteady. There's a situation that we find ourselves in, and I want you to try as best you can to forget the central figure, and let's concentrate more on the issue. And the issue is about business. It's about really and truly the convergence of politics and business. And folks, rest assured, politics and business bump into one another mainly in points of conflict. I mean, there's mainly a suspicion that business has of government, a suspicion that government has of business. At times, it's measured and healthy. At other times, it's unbelievably unhealthy. And in the most extreme examples, it borders on dangerous and un-American. And I think that's where we are today in this situation I want to try and cover, discuss, and talk about. And I think it's a very appropriate topic today when we thank our sponsors. Pepsi of Florence, Carolina Bank, Micky MPD Electric Co-op, Marion University, McLeod Health, McCall Farms, Victor's, PLC, Commercial Real Estate. I can't think of an array of businesses that I could be more honored to be associated with. And I've said redundantly over the podcast airwaves, video and audio, it is not my desire to try and make this an extension of conservative talk radio. Conservative talk radio is controversial by nature. The reason it's extremely controversial is we're a big-ass nation. We're 330 million people, and nobody believes exactly the same thing. And talk radio allows for, at times, civil discourse, at times not so civil discourse. You get to express yourself as you see fit. So by its very nature, that's going to be very intensely controversial, confrontational, and at times spooks some of the neutral-minded businesses from being a part of that. I went and met with every one of these businesses, and I said, I don't want to be a charity case. I want you to help me build. And we're not there yet. I'm not misleading our listeners, but we're going to get there, and we're going to get there together. But none of this is possible without Pepsi of Florence, Carolina Bank, Micky MPD Electric Co-op, Marion University, McLeod Health, McCall Farms, Victor's, PLC Commercial. These are not sponsors of our show. These are relationships in my life that matter more than you can imagine. So when I say these businesses' name, it's not just kind of a moniker in the bottom of the screen. You'll see some of that. Dave Baker does a great job of making sure our sponsors get as much exposure. But these are relationships that I've cultivated over my years of being a person who grew up in the PD, have no interest in living anywhere but the PD. And the investments these businesses have made to the PD are profound and critically important to us trying to invigorate some sort of conversation about politics, business, culture, and whatever we may have on our mind. The reason that I want to highlight these businesses and emphasize these businesses, we talked about, the conflict, the convergence of politics and business, the suspicion that each have of the other. The healthiness at times of making sure we don't build houses that fall down, we don't build bridges that fall in rivers. I accept that there is a natural alliance that government and business must have to formulate a better and safer economy. But I want you to try and do something for me today. It's hard for me. I would imagine it'll be hard for you. There is no denying that Donald Trump is probably the most controversial and unique political figure of my lifetime. I don't remember Andrew Jackson. I don't remember Thomas Jefferson. I don't remember Abraham Lincoln. All of those were consequential American presidents. And in a weird way, they did some pretty controversial things. History seems to treat some more kind than it does others. But at certain points in their political careers, they made pretty dramatic and extreme decisions about what needed to be done. So I want you to try and not think about Donald Trump. I mean, let's say generic President A. That's hard, and I understand it's hard, but it's necessary if you're going to be objective in what is fair, what is not, what's extreme, what's not, what's patriotic, what's not, what's American, what borders on un-American. And the reason that I'm so upset about this, I mean, I have been under the bright lights of politics. I had a bad episode in my political life. I owned it the best way I knew how. I moved on the best way I knew how. Of course, there's a degree of me. There's a certain sensibility inside of me that says, well, I mean, damn, they did this with me and didn't do that with all these others. But I've learned the fair comes in October, and you do the best you can to kind of move along and move forward and advance. And it is what it is. I mean, it is what it is. I guess there's an unspokenness about my bond with someone who tries to change the way political normalcy is addressed or kind of agreed upon by some call it the uniparty, some call it the ruling class, some call it the masters of the universe, some call it the cathedral, some call it the deep state. I don't care what you call it. But I think it's hard to deny that a certain group of individuals and companies and corporations and I guess government agencies have amassed enormous influence in our government. When you amass enormous influence in government, you by its very nature amass enormous influence in business. You amass enormous influence in our personal lives. I mean, we live in a nation that I would argue experiences the heavy hand of government more frequently and more severely than we should. I personally believe, as kind of a libertarian-leaning Jeffersonian, that government today has become far more punitive than our founders ever intended for government to be. But I'll accept some of the politics. I'll accept that Donald Trump is an easy target. I'll accept that Donald Trump, in certain situations and circumstances, gets exactly what he asked for. Fake news. When you refer to the media as fake news, what do you think the media is going to do? Treat you fairly or take that personally? So I'm not defending by any stretch of the imagination some of the antics of Trump, some of the behavior of Trump, some of the policies of Trump. But every now and then something happens that makes me jittery. I mean, it makes me nervous. And for those that know me, I don't jitter easily. I don't get real nervous. It's probably I'd like to believe it's a good quality. It's probably a bad quality. There are times in my life I probably need to be more nervous and concerned and jittery than I usually am. But it goes back to kind of it is what it is. I've accepted that my life is not perfect. My stances and beliefs are not perfect. I do the best I can to defend them when it's necessary. But once again, I've accepted. I don't like it, but I've accepted that the body politic doesn't work for Ken. The body politic doesn't respond to everything that I wish it would do or wish it wouldn't do or believe is the right thing to do or the wrong thing to do. I mean, I've accepted that once again, big-ass complicated nation is going to be very complicated to govern. I mean, it just is. It's almost as if the American presidency is impossible for anybody to do now. We're diverse. We're to some degree. I don't think we're as free and liberty loving as we once were, but it's still a profession we hold. It's something we believe in. Do we act upon it? Probably not as much as I'd like to see. But once again, I'm not here as usual trying to convince you what I believe is right. But I've always said that there is no desire in the bowels of my soul. There is no desire whatsoever in the back of my mind to convince you to believe exactly what I believe. I have no desire to convince you. I have no desire to indoctrinate you. I have no desire to make you believe that some of the things you hold near and dear, some of the things you fundamentally believe in are wrong. But once again, at times, there are things happen that I find alarming. And something happened last week that I find very alarming. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not a scholar. I don't have the ability to litigate. I don't have the ability to lecture or educate. I'm a college dropout from a town with no stoplights, hence the name of this podcast. But I've lived a long time. I've done a lot of things in my life. I have some successes. I have some failures. A couple got rained out. But by and large, I've lived a life that has allowed me to experience a lot of sort of different things. And the majority of our opinions are based on the events and experiences that led us to wherever it is we are. The state of New York decided last week, a judge in New York, an appointed judge with all the authority imaginable, with all the authority that's sitting behind a bench with a purple robe and a gavel and the United States of America seal backstopping what you decide, the decisions you make have the full authority and might of our federal government. A judge in New York last week decided that, and I want to go back to the politics. Forget Trump for us. I know it's hard. I understand it's almost impossible. But let's make, for argument's sake, let's just play hypothetical. Let's say that you and I were producing a movie in Hollywood. And in that, and I brought you a script. Seinfeld's a show about nothing. This would be a show or blockbuster about a potential American president that half the country really didn't like and the other half the country liked. A third of the country just has great disdain for this guy. A third of the country find it to be somewhat of a folk hero. A tragic hero. He's the cowboy in the Western that rides out of town after order is restored because he just can't stay there. There's some of that here. But let's for argument's sake, we know this would never happen in America because once again, we've got a Constitution, we've got a Declaration of Independence, we're fair-minded people by and large. But let's just imagine that we got so radical in our self-government that one political party and some in the other, let's be honest, this isn't totally nonpartisan. This is about every Democrat and maybe 25 or so % of Republicans. So when we're writing the script for the movie, one of the highlights, all Democrats, 25% of Republicans. Once again, hypothetical. No, it never happened, but most Hollywood blockbusters don't happen. Superman don't fly. Batman doesn't have superpowers. But in that blockbuster, let's say that government got so radical that a guy who had never been indicted in his life ran for president, won, ran again, lost, ran again with a chance to win the third time. And the judiciary in America decided to indict him 91 times in 3 states and 1 locale. I think New York, Georgia, and Florida all have lawsuits against this hypothetical president. Once again, this will never happen, but we're writing a Hollywood script. Let's say that out of that came what I perceive to be somewhat politically motivated charges, but once again, guy lived 75 years on this planet. In the rough and tumble business world where you would imagine you're bound to bump into an indictment or two in the high-flying world of commercial real estate and skyscrapers in Queens and Manhattan. But for some crazy reason, this person, this hypothetical man, has figured out a way to not be indicted of a crime in over 70 years of existence on planet Earth. He runs for office, he wins. He runs for office, he loses. He decides to run again, and he all of a sudden faces 91 indictments. And the indictments include mishandling classified information, obstructing justice, inciting an insurrection despite never having been charged or convicted of inciting an insurrection. But it's Hollywood. It's not the real world. It's Hollywood. So who's keeping up with that? Let's say that after this hypothetical candidate was indicted 91 times in 3 states and 1 locale, his poll numbers went up. We know that would never happen. That's how you know it's a Hollywood script. But his poll numbers go up. And nobody knows what to make of that. Once again, every Democrat, 25% of Republicans can't make heads nor tails of that. So plan B is let's take him off the ballot. Yeah. I mean, let's take him. I mean, Putin gets 95% of the vote. I mean, that's Russia. I don't know what Xi Jinping gets in China. I'm sure it's a pretty hefty amount. He's probably not in a nail biter when they have some of these elections in communist and socialist biased countries. But let's say that 2 or 3 or 4 states say that I know there are people in these states that want to vote for this guy, but we are the government and we're deciding that we're not going to allow them to do that. We're going to take him off the ballot. I mean, that, once again, never happened here. Might happen in China, might happen in Russia, might happen in the Banana Republic. Never happened here. We never have a guy, never been indicted of a crime, living the most controversial, complicated business existence known to man, and then he runs for office and he's indicted for 91 crimes. That's how you know it's make-believe. And then his poll numbers go up, so the powers to be, the uniparty, the cathedral, the ruling class, the deep state, they encourage some of these states to take him off the ballot. And they do. I mean, they literally take his name off the ballot. Fully sworn-in judges say, damn the Constitution, you know, and what we all stand for and believe in, free and fair elect. I mean, we're not involved in that. The U.S. Supreme Court has to make a decision. It looks like the U.S. Supreme Court will decide at some point in time that you've got to leave him on the ballot. None of that is fair. All of that is impartial. All of that, is partial. It's not, there's no neutrality in this particular candidate who forces nearly every American to form a pretty aggressive opinion of. But that's politics. And I think despite us liking the nature of American politics today, we've kind of accepted that there's no extreme the body politic won't go to get its way. I mean, it's this monster of a machine. It's this monstrosity of power and influence, and it's going to get its way. And you better not get in its way or you get destroyed. That's politics. Ballot access, taking someone off a ballot, breaking some federal code with a riot gone bad that some argue was an insurrection, but all that's in the realm of politics. I'm not saying it's fair game, but I do understand that. I understand the zero-sum nature of politics. I understand what some people are willing to do to get their way, and if their way means dismissing the American political world of this particular candidate, that's what we'll do. This is where it gets troubling to me. I'm troubled by the other, but I'm not that surprised. America in its best day, all of us are surprised when something like those two hypotheticals were to play themselves out. And once again, a reminder, we're talking about hypotheticals here. So let's say that the attempt to indict and charge with crimes made him more popular with the general public. Let's say that once they decided to try and take his name off the ballot, he became a little more relevant political figure. The likelihood of him winning again increased. The likelihood of him winning increases when they indict. The likelihood of him winning increases when he's taken off the ballot. But then you go after what I consider to be something I never imagined, and maybe that's my naivete. Maybe that's, being more of a believer in America than America deserves right now. Maybe that's more faith and trust I have in powerful leaders than I should give them credit for. But let's say that a judge in the state of New York decides that this person who's been indicted 91 times, his name has been taken off the ballot, and we think it'll be put back on the ballot in due time. But let's say this person who has been in business his entire adult life has made numerous loans, has paid back numerous loans. He's had some bankruptcies along the way. He's had some business failures along the way. That's kind of the beauty of America. I mean, you show me a successful businessman or woman, and I'll show you one who got skin up along the way, who had some misses, some mistakes, who had some problems in their business world. But at the end of the day, the guy has a private jet. That'd be a good plot for the movie. Let's just say he ends up wealthy enough to have his private jet. And he's built this business empire in commercial property, real estate development, golf course management, golf course construction. And he negotiates with banks how much money they'll lend, what term and interest rate they'll lend the money. And I got to believe, guys, I've never been in a couple of $100 million investment deal. I mean, I'm a business person, but I'm on the low end of the totem pole. I mean, I'm begging the bank to give me all I can get and pay as little interest for as long a period of time. You know, maybe that's a violation of some federal code. I don't know. I'm glad I'm not in New York. I mean, I'd like to believe judiciary in South Carolina is a little more business friendly than what is going on in New York. But let's paint another hypothetical scenario. Let's say that this presidential candidate / business guy walks into a boardroom at a bank with his team, with his entourage of accountants and lawyers and financial experts. And on the other side of the table is an array of bankers and bank associates, and I would imagine credit monitors, and, you know, some of the gurus of banking are there, and they have this real elaborate and sophisticated debate or conversation about business. And the central issue with the business is the client, in this case, a hypothetical former president running for re-election a second time. Let's say that he's got with him the members of his organization, and they begin arguing over what a building's worth. And this hypothetical president says the building's worth $400 million. And we want to borrow $200 million against that $400 million. The bank says the building's not worth $400 million. The building's worth $200 million. And we talk about loan to value and EBITDA and ROI and NOI and construction loans and conversion to traditional finance and 15-year term, 20-year term, LIBOR, Fed rate plus, prime. And anyway, it's an elaborate, sophisticated conversation between very sophisticated business people. One on this side of the table, one on that side. This is the guy trying to borrow the money. That's the team trying to decide whether or not it makes sense for their shareholders, for their company to lend this guy money. They make a deal. The bank agrees that under certain terms and conditions, this person is creditworthy. He's able to borrow the money, and he does. And he creates a project, and it employs people, and it pays ad valorem taxes, and it generates positive cash flow. And every time it generates positive cash flow, I got no idea what the finance arrangement was. But at the end of the day, the person who borrowed the money pays the person he borrowed the money from back in its entirety. I don't want to get into appraisals and assessments. Yeah, to believe that a bank would loan money to anybody, based on what they say the property is worth, demonstrates a financial illiteracy that shouldn't allow you to be commenting on whether this hypothetical former president is dealing with fairness, equality, equity. We're big on that now, equity and equality or not. A judge in New York, well, first of all, a prosecutor in New York who ran based on, I'll go after this guy, I've given the opportunity. I mean, he thinks he's all that. He's trying to upset the apple cart. I depend on the apple cart. I mean, he's upsetting the body politic. I am a part of the body politic. I mean, he throws rocks at the establishment. The insiders drain the swamp. I mean, I am the swamp. I depend on the swamp. So I'm running for office with the intent to teach that guy a lesson. And she does. She brings formal charges against the guy that borrowed the money because he inflated the value of his assets. Now, forget that the bank is in the room, and I would imagine he inflated the value of the assets. And they haggle and barter and negotiate, and out of that comes something the bank agrees on, something the borrower, in this case, the hypothetical former president, agrees on. The publicly elected official from the state of New York who has the authority to bring charges against this hypothetical president does. And it goes before a judge. And the New York state law says the judge makes the decision, and despite what we've always believed, you don't have a right to a jury trial. You don't have a right to 12 peers making a decision whether these charges are just, whether you're guilty of what the charges we're bringing against you are. He goes to a judge because he doesn't have the right to a jury trial. So he stands before a judge, And he looks the judge in the eye. And on day one, the judge says, I'm pretty sure you committed a crime. I mean, that's what this legal system is about, right? I mean, we throw rocks at Russia and China and some of the banana republics, so we would never, ever, but this is a movie. I mean, we're playing things out as blockbusters in Hollywood play out. Forget reality. I mean, this is craziness. This is America on the big screen. So the judge says, we're going to have a trial. We're going to have a hearing. This duly elected and fully responsible official of the state of New York believes that you broke the law. It's my job to make a determination whether you did or not. I've already determined that. I'm just going to play this thing out until the end. So the bank comes, and I would imagine that the bank, I know this because the transcript shows this. The bank said, when I asked, did you loan this hypothetical president money? Yes, we did. Did he pay it back? Yes, we did. Did you take his word on what the valuation of the property was? No, we didn't. What did you do? We sent appraisers out. We sent teams of appraisers. We sent back an appraisal to the borrower. He didn't like it, so we sat down and haggled again. We negotiated again. We wanted 0.5% more in interest. We wanted a little different repayment plan. We haggled and argued over that. We ended up not getting 0.5 percentage point, but 0.25 percentage point more. We were very comfortable with the risk. We're very comfortable with the relationship we have. In fact, if this gentleman wanted to borrow money again, we'd happily lend it. I mean, we know more about his business now than we ever did, but there's still formalities. We still have to go through a very formal process if he wanted to borrow more money. So the judge hears all of this, and the judge basically says, and this is why I mentioned all of our businesses. The judge basically says, I know you and the bank made a deal, but I'm the judge. I'm not the bank. I'm not the borrower, but I'm the judge. And I have the authority invested in me by the state of New York to decide whether you broke the law or not. And I'm making a determination that you did. And because you've not been contrite, because you've defended the value of these properties you say are worth X number of dollars, I'm going to offer the most outrageous punishment you could imagine. I would cut you a break if you admitted your sin, your venial sin. It's a forgivable sin. It's not a mortal sin. Didn't shoot anybody. I mean, I think the judge even said, and let's give him a little credit. I think the judge even said, he's no Bernie Madoff. Now, we're talking about a hypothetical president. Bernie Madoff's a real guy. We're talking about a hypothetical president. He's no Bernie Madoff, but he's a crook. He's a criminal. He's a crook and a criminal because the deal he made with the bank is not in good standing with the bureaucracy known as the New York State government. Where does that lead us? How many businessmen or women have ever negotiated with a bank without the government looking over their shoulder? I mean, isn't that America? I mean, isn't there always been some degree of separation between the private sector and what's allowed, the animal spirits of capitalism, as my father referred to those are, and bureaucrats who are minding the store? See, guys, I don't like 91 indictments, but I understand politics. I don't like trying to take somebody off a ballot, but I understand that politics is a zero-sum game, and people do whatever in the hell they need to do to win because there's so much at risk. But the decision a judge made in New York, the decision a prosecutor made in New York, validated by a judge, is one of the most egregious examples of government meddling in the affairs of the private sector. And I guess I'm speaking directly to the 25% of Americans who profess to be conservative, profess to be for limited government, but find this hypothetical president so unacceptable that they'll turn a shoulder to what they fundamentally believe in. That bothers me. That irks me. That irritates me. That pisses me off in a way you can't imagine because I don't understand lawfare. I don't understand constitutional law. I don't understand legal theorizing. I don't understand some of the issues that have come down the pike, both Republican and Democrat. But I do understand this. Because like these businesses, like Pepsi of Florence, like Carolina Bank, like Micky Finn's, like MPD Electric Cooperative, like Francis Marion University, like McLeod Health, McCall Farms, Victor's, PLC Commercial, these people feed the beast. And the beast is so disrespectful of the very people that feed it. And this is a classic, one of the most classic examples of government overreach that I've ever seen in my life. And we live in an era, and an age of pretty consistent government overreach. And I've got friends of mine who say, hey, man, you got to tamp this aggressive opinion down a bit. I mean, I had a conversation, two business partners of mine yesterday, had to send an apologetic text because I probably overreacted, and I got a little bit personal with them. It's unfair to them. They're business-minded. They're fair-minded. If this doesn't get us aggressively aggravated, what will? And I mean that sincerely. Once again, I don't like 91 indictments. I mean, I think the majority are politically motivated. I think most Americans believe the majority are politically motivated. I don't like trying to take a guy's name off the ballot. I believe the majority are politically motivated. But trying to bankrupt a man, trying to run a man's business in the ground, trying to cause a man who has worked his entire life, love him, hate him, don't give a rat's ass about him, he has managed to win more than he loses. And to me, that's the beauty of American business. Entrepreneurship, free enterprise, a market-based economy, and a judge in New York insulted every single thing I've ever believed about America and our free market. Politics has its place. The government has its place. But when government so significantly oversteps its bounds, I want to know why every conservative in America isn't totally upset and out of kilter. And I read Twitter, and I occasionally go on Facebook, and I read websites, and I try to understand and educate myself about the world around me. And if you are one of the conservatives who have allowed your personal disdain for this hypothetical figure that doesn't exist to get in the way of what you fundamentally believe in, put faith in, and trust in, then you need to look in the mirror. Not this hypothetical former American president. Thank you very much for joining us on No Stoplights. Do want to do this for the first time ever. Subscribe. We need more subscribers. We need more, airtime in the day is what you would call it. And I want to say this. I apologize for the aggressive nature of the last 10 minutes of the podcast, but this is something in my bones. I mean, I live the American dream. Many of you don't know this story, but my father started a business in a tobacco field in 1963, and out of that grew one of the largest truck body manufacturing business in all of the Southeast. And I watched him. Go to work every day, and I watched him worry about what government may or may not do next, living to some degree at the mercy of authority, at the mercy of what to me, what should be a free and fair government. And this is just an example of what government will do when it comes irrationally obsessed with somebody they find unacceptable as an American president. So thank you for joining us again. Please like us. Please subscribe. It helps us become a little more out there. And we're going to get there. We did it on the radio. Took a while. We'll do it on podcasting, but we won't do it without our sponsors. We won't do it without you who choose to look in, to kind of consume the content and make of it whatever you choose to make of it. Thank you.